Hello, my name is Amanda Koch, a member of VFW Post 1493. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual Memorial Day ceremony. On Memorial Day, we take time to remember those who died in service to our nation. I can think of no time more appropriate than during a pandemic when our nation is serving and sacrificing for each other to continue this tradition in a unique way. Though our community can't all meet in person, we are committed to this annual tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice serving in our armed forces. We will begin with a prayer from our post chaplain, Robert Easton.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for everyone joining us today. First, I'd like to start off with two quotes from two great presidents. First, from President John F. Kennedy. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Another quote by President Ronald Reagan. And if words cannot repay the debt we owe these men and women, surely with our actions we must strive to keep faith with them and with the vision that led them to the battle and to the final sacrifice. Now let us bow our heads. O Lord Almighty, remember those who have lived and died fighting to protect the dignity and the freedom of mankind. Let our spirits be proud of them. Let our hearts be compassionate and our minds clear and determined in giving them honor and respect. And let us be dependent on the loving kindness of the Lord our God. As we remember the departed, let us be true warriors in war and on peace. Let us be courageous protectors and true guardians of freedom. Let us be the true masters of brotherly love. O Lord, guide us in the way of moral responsibility. Enlighten us, who are true believers in ethics and justice. Let this day be a day of commemoration and honor to those who sacrificed their lives in order to give us liberty and our nation's security. Remember them, O Lord, in your mercy, and have compassion on us. Make us a generation of wisdom, discipline, and faith, we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you. I want to turn our attention to Commander Stan Tolinsky as he lowers the flag to half-mast in a sign of respect for those who have passed. Our chaplain, Rob Easton, is laying the memorial wreath on our memorial to our armed services in remembrance of those who have passed. Now, we have an address from our mayor, Jim Holland.
Thank you, Amanda. Even during this COVID pandemic, it is appropriate and it is essential that we remember and honor deceased veterans. We also reflect on the sacrifices that soldiers, sailors, airmen and women, Marines and Coast Guard men and women make for all of us. My name is Jim Holland. I was a pilot in the United States Coast Guard. I am a member of Frankfort American Legion Post 2000, and I'm the mayor of the Village of Frankfort. During the American Civil War, people periodically brought flowers to cemeteries to decorate the graves of those who had died in battle. These decoration days became common in both northern and southern states. Illinois General John Logan ordered personnel at Arlington Cemetery to use flowers to decorate the graves of soldiers who had died during the Civil War on May 30th, 1868. Over the years, Memorial Day became a time to remember all deceased veterans. In 1971, the United States Congress passed the National Holiday Act, which declared the last Monday in May as Memorial Day. The Frankfort community was just 13 years old when that first Memorial Day was observed in 1868. Frankfort continues to observe Memorial Day by decorating the graves of veterans in our local cemeteries. On this day, we honor deceased veterans, and we also thank the men and women of our armed forces for currently serving. We pray for their safe return. For many years, our Frankfort VFW Post has sponsored this Memorial Day. We thank the members of the VFW for their ongoing service to men and women and the families of service people. We certainly thank Hickory Creek Middle School music director Doug Adams for arranging taps to be played by those talented students, Jackson Cummings and Aiden Reid. We thank Frankfort Police Chief John Barica and Deputy Chiefs Kevin Keegan and Will Dowding for their participation in this virtual event. Even in a pandemic, let us remember how fortunate we are to live in a free society. And let us remember that we still rely on our own sons and daughters to defend our liberty. We thank those who currently serve in the armed forces for their contribution to our security. We thank those who have previously served in the armed forces, and we thank those who gave their lives for our freedom. May God bless America and her servicemen and women. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holland. Our special guest, Will County Chief Deputy State's Attorney and fellow veteran Ken Gray, will now read the names of deceased veterans from Frankfort buried at Abraham Lincoln, Pleasant Hill, Rose Hill, Skyline Cemeteries, and elsewhere. Ken?
Thank you very much, Amanda. I want to thank Amanda for hosting this, along with the VFW, of course, 1493, and the mayor and chaplain being out here. And it means a lot to all of us veterans that we continue to remember those who have gone before us and who, in many cases, paid the ultimate sacrifice and price for our freedom and the liberties that we in this great country enjoy on a daily and regular basis. I also want to thank Amanda and Steve Stigler and Phyllis Stigler for compiling and keeping up to date the rolls. It's not an easy job, but people feed us information, which is we are very grateful for. I also want to thank the VFW Post 1493 for the great parades we've had over the years, and we'll be doing that again, I'm sure. And also for all that they do for our community and for the devoted service of our great country. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank Mayor Holland for every year being here and reminding us of the importance of this auspicious day. I always love his words and his great thoughts that he puts into this talk, and it's very meaningful, and I greatly appreciate that. And it may seem like a little thing, but I want to thank our Frankfort's First Lady, Stacy Holland, for never forgetting the water every year, which I usually forget to come and bring it. So I very much appreciate that. And something I say every year, I've been doing this for quite a while, but please forgive me if I mispronounce a name in the role. Between Steve and Phyllis and Betty Bulmer, my former legal secretary, my wife, Tony Lee, and we work very hard to review the names. And in some cases, we've called others with that same name, sometimes family members, to assure correct pronunciation. In the event you hear a mispronunciation, please let us know afterwards or anytime during the course of the year, and we'll make that correction for the following year. Finally, I am honored and humbled to carry on this tradition of reading the roll, which began with Mayor George Sangmeister, at least began in Frankfort with Mayor George Sangmeister many decades ago, carried on by his son, former Congressman George E. Sangmeister, who was one of my partners for many years and certainly a mentor as a young man. Congressman Sangmeister, in the event you've never heard of him these days, was the moving member of Congress who established the Abraham Lincoln National Cemetery and is in fact buried in its hallowed ground. We must always remember that oft-repeated phrase, freedom is not free. Many of the names I will be reading paid that ultimate price in ensuring that we continue to enjoy that freedom and liberty which is so precious for us all. Now, the reading of the roll. These are the names of those who have served our country with honor and distinction and are buried at Twining Cemetery. Andrew Barge, Howard W. Duke, Uriah Hardy, Andrew T. Holm, Edwell A. Rabb. Those buried at Frankfort Cemetery: Frankfort Abbott, George Bussey, Donald Carroll, Eugene Eisenbrandt, Melvin Eisenbrandt, Andrew Eisenbrandt, Richard G. Folletti, Harry E. Gibson, Ted Gibson, Clifford Grizzled, Walter Hawkinson, Glenn G. Jacobs, Joseph Mashkin, Dalton Miller, David William Nelson, Frank J. Reitz, Edward Stippen, Harold J. Wingler, Joseph W. Zimmerman. Those buried at Pleasant Hill Cemetery: Nick Aducci, Irvie J. Albright, Nick Altavilla, Jimmy John Altavilla, Stephen Amir, Alma Bailey, John Bailey, Anthony Ballencount, Julius A. Barnes, Richard Barnes, Kenneth Bomber, Norman W. Baumgartner, Victor K. Beckman, Louis Belcher, Edward H. Bells, Clark W. Bennett, Robert R. Bennett, Raymond Bettenhausen, John N. Benetti, Cyril Blackwell, Thomas Blaney, Kenneth Bloomer, Stanley Bobson, Henry P. Bach, Jerry C. Bach, Donald Betcher, Arthur Bogaz, Kenneth Boonstra, Sam Bredlinger, Norman Bree, Joseph Belzira, Edward Bukowinski, Ruth Burns, Leonard R. Busen, John Caldwell, Evelyn Canterbury, Ray Canterbury, Carl Cardinal, Lenore Cardinal, Donald Carlson, Kenneth Carlson, Mac Carson, Horace N. Cachetta, Stephen Chambers, Walter J. Cheney, Lloyd Cleveland, William Cleveland, Kenneth Cohn, Terry L. Coser, Robert Crutchfield, Thomas A. Curran, Chester Zerneda, Anna P. Dagan, William J. Dagan, William Dangel, Albert L. Diefenbach, Russell Leon Davis, Donald DeHart, Jacob DePorto, Harry D'Arcole, George Dirkavita, Cornelius DeWitt, Cornelius K. Dillon, Klaus P. Ditchler, William Dugan, Ambrose Doty, Robert P. Desden, Ralph Drawley, Bruce Ebert, Chester Ebert, Edmund Ebert, Jack L. Edmondson, George Robert Elsner, Eric H. Erickson, Azel Erickson, Robert D. Evans, Michael Falachek, Joseph Ficker, Herbert P. Folkers, Herbert Folkers Jr., Johnson Folkers, Dale Fordyce, Ronald D. Fox, Ronald J. Fredericks, Robert Fredine, Robert Frey, Leonard Fries, Robert E. Fritz, Fred Fulsang, Robert M. Gaba, Udell W. Gay, Delmar Janens, Donald Janens, Harry Janens, William Janens, Earl Gierman, Sam Giordano, John W. Glisson, James M. Grady, Donald R. Graves, Alvin Gullickson, William Guzika, Kennard Hawkinson, Emil T. Haas, Sam Hageman, Richard Hansen Jr., Henry Harnack, Ronald W. Harnack, Roland Hatcher, Bernard J. Hauser, Joseph Hebard, William Hecht, Charles Hagan, Melvin Hine, Clarence Heisner, Ray M. Hensley Jr., Raymond Hernandez, Ralph Leonard Hitz, Charles Hornback, Walter Horton, Harry Hodgkin, Robert Dean Hull, John Henry Yeager, Leonard Japp Jr., Leroy Yarkow, Gary Johansson, George H. Johnson. Sorry, I repeat that. George H. Johnson, Kenneth Johnson, Olaf A. Johnson, Roy Johnson, Joseph B. Jolly, John Keller, Frank Kerr, Joseph Kerwin, Warren W. Keek, Dennis Kimsey, Rupert Kingery, Thomas Kinnery, Orville Knierim, William Knipple, Robert Collar, Stanley Kostecki, John Kotas, Frank Kovar, Leslie Kraft, Erwin A. Kruger, Richard J. Krenicki, John Coos, Albert M. Lally, James Albert Larimore, George Leffler, John Leffler, Wendell M. Leffler, Frank Lagero, Frank E. Lagero, Maynard W. Lukert, Glenn Lewis, Troy Lyerly, Klaus Peter Lichtenfeld, Bruno Liento, James Edward Logan, George Ludolf, Lloyd P. Luring, Edgar Lund, Robert O. Lundquist, John Maddox, Andrew J. Melito, James McCarthy, James McDermott, Charles McMiniman, Francis J. McNally, Thomas Myers, George Martin Mickelson, Michael Mikas, Robert W. P. Mitchell, John C. Moulter, John Montella, Henry J. Montel, Louis Marino, Ralph E. Morrison, Charles L. Moskop, Fred Muff, James Munch, Jack Munger, Wilfred Niedringhaus, Robert Newgren, Ralph Neeland, Ronald H. Nevada, Donald H. Oliveri, Charles Olson, Philip J. Ortegal, William Osman, David Parks, Charles L. Pasca, James A. Patterson, Leonard Peterson Jr., Herbert E. Phillips, Clarence Pieper, Emmerich J. Piler, Marion J. Pamakala, Wayne Price, James Pyle, Clarence J. Radke, Russell Ragsdell, Robert Raka, Albert Redman, Fred Reimers, William Reimers, Jack A. Rinaldi, Daniel Rarica, Robert Reynolds, James Rice, Ronald Rimkus, David Roberts, William Robinson, Earl Rousseau, Eris Rudman, Dr. Irving Rudman, William J. Rung, Frank R. Saletta, Brent Sanders, Julius J. Sandy, Paul Scaletta, James J. Scanlon, Richard T. Shedecke, Rodney Schaefer, Herbert J. Shoup, Alan Schramm, Norbert Schroeder, George Schultz, Earl Scott, Delbert F. Seaman, Percy Severson, Forrest Shaw, Clarence Ciano Jr., Raleigh V. Sinks, Woodrow Simmons, Frank F. Sinat, Scott C. Skoglund, Frank J. Scalish, Raymond Smith, Reverend Laverne Smith, William Smith, Eric Spengler, Robert L. Stanek, Stanley Staton, Arnold J. Steves, Chester Stefanik, Roy Stellwagen, James R. Stern, Meade Stuckey, Richard Cernovic, Fred Surya, Donald Swanberg, George R. Swanberg, Matt Zemansky, Joseph Telesferi, Antonio Tortorici, Bruno F. Trento, Martin Tuck, Alexander Melvin Turner, Sylvester Tyler, Arthur Van Cura, Willard Van Eck, Henry Van Winkle, Thomas Vogler, Edward Vollrath, Lambert Vollrath, John Wagner, Curtis L. Waldvogel, William Walker, Jeremiah Wall, James Warren, Charles Weber, Cheryl Whitebrodt, Fred B. Wietendorf, Andrew Wershing, William White, Everett Whitmore, Charles Wingler, John L. Wiat, Henry V. Wood, Joseph Demotich, Paul Zenzina, those buried at Rose Hill Cemetery, Edwin Brandow, George Brandow, Lloyd W. Brandow, Ronald O. Elwell, Russell J. Elwell, George Heisner, Arthur Conrad Mark Jr., Frank Mark, Walter Mark, Henry Ross, Jacob Ross. Those buried at Skyline Cemetery, Gerald Abbey, Arthur E. Anderson, Alexander A. Antusis, Melvin Bartles, Eugene Batson, William Batson, Melvin Bernardi, James A. Brunero, William Blau, Edward Brown, Leland Dalton, John P. DeVos, Glenn E. Farrell, Herbert B. Hardy, Clarence Harms, Milton W. Harms, Edward L. Hartley, Irvin Holm, Frederick Holzoffel Sr., Henry Hosbach, Frederick H. Koch, Leroy Cluth, George Merton, Donald C. Myers, Harry E. Miller, Ernest J. Nelvilli, Glenn Nissen, Oliver F. Pass, Fred K. Paxton, James A. Rafoff, Frank Saratori, Harold Ellsworth Schiffler, Gottfried Chinkowski, Orville Chinkowski, Howard J. Seaman, William D. Shanafelt, George F. Schaus, Donald E. Stephen, John Joseph Tyler, Casimir M. Wozak, Vincent N. Zeranti, Andrew Zink. Those veterans buried elsewhere from Frankfort. Jerome K. Ackert, Donald H. Eggleston, Leland B. Alderson, Fermi A. Alderson, John Alfano, Rudolph Y. Alagrucci, Kenneth A. Allen, Thomas M. Allen, Gus Anagnos, Herman S. Anderson, Nels Anderson, Robert L. Anderson, William J. Andresiak, John P. Angelis, James R. Angio, Timothy J. Arman, Clarence H. Bach, Richard Bacino, Al Baggs, James Balat, Norbert Balat, Harold Baldacci, Melvin A. Bartles, Robert T. Baxter, Hugo Becker, Chester Bellowin, Joseph A. Bella, Ernest H. Bennett, David Lee Benson, Catherine L. Berkery, Batista Bertoletti, Robert C. Besson, William L. Blakemore, John C. Blansett Sr., Norton Blaylock, Richard J. Bach, Warren Harold Bach, Edward J. Badong, Jack Bone, Thomas F. Ballin, Harold A. Barmett, Eugene Brackman, William S. Bradford, Paul Brandow, Marvin F. Bremer, Leo B. Brennan, Melvin R. Brink, Henry C. Brinkmeyer, Richard D. Bruno, August A. Butcher, Alice M. Buddy, Angelo J. Caliendo, William Thomas Campbell, Don V. Cap, John F. Caparelli, Paul M. Carlson, John G. Cernauskas, I'll repeat that, John G. Cernauskas, Paul Chamberlain, Jack Chiappetta, John E. Corley, Patrick F. Connolly, Cornelius J. Cook, Jack Cook, Noah W. Crane, Frederick Cross, Edward E. Crowder, Joseph P. Cryan, James P. Cummings, Joseph B. Currier, Alan J. Curry, Lawrence Chaswitz Sr., James N. Daly, Albert L. Diefenbach, Frank E. David, George E. Davies, Geno DeRay, James J. Delaney, William V. DeLauder, David P. Detmer, Neil O. DeVore Sr., Frederick H. Dinger, Dominic A. Dirutellilirth, forgive me on this one, Dirutiliani, Thomas H. That's Dominic A. Dirutiliani, Thomas H. Donovan, Russell A. Dubrauer, Stanley Charles Douglas, Francis Doyle, John Dorch, John A. Duncan, John DeRocker, William F. Earhart III, Gene R. Ellis, Thomas Edward Ellis, Alan P. Engelhart, Harry L. Engeldow, Robert J. Erdy, Andrew M. Evans, Ralter S. Farron, Lee W. Filippo, David H. Finnegan, Nicholas Fisher, Herman Fleischem, Henry Flenchy, Frank Felici, Thomas J. Frangella, Herman L. Frank, James Freeman, William A. Friedel, Garetano Kenneth Foucault, James Robert Garofalo, Warren H. Garrett, Anthony S. Gasbaro, Frank Robert Giamato, Dale Janens, Eugene J. Girardi Sr., Ricardo A. Girardi, Harry M. Gerkitz, John G. Jernauskas, Ted Gerndt, Frederick J. Glatz, Edward Golden, John Golden, Sebastian Gonlag, Carl G. Gren, Leonard B. Gromnicki, Edward Gross, Leo H. Grizuki, George A. Haddad, Lloyd R. Hall, William J. Halperin, William C. Hardy, Ernest A. Hargison, Raymond Harms, Daniel P. Hatton, Charles E. Hecht, Calvin A. Hine, Lawrence Hobson, Lester R. Hochhalter, John Hogan, Lawrence Hogan, Leo Thomas Hogan, William R. Hoffulson, Leon Holman, Edward Hooton, James J. Horvath, Robert W. Rara, Dean Paul Hulhorst Sr., Lawrence A. Estelle, Margaret Estelle, John S. Ivers, Robert Yan, Michael J. Jamrock, Ignatius J. Janusik, William R. Jensen, Albert Johnson, John W. Johnson, Walter J. Johnson, Roy Jones, Norman W. Judas, Richard Kazmarsky, Wayne Karstensen, Edward J. Kazarskas Sr., Herman G. Kautz, Ronald J. Keene, Herman J. Kaiser, James C. Keeler, Richard Keeler, Thomas Kellerman, James J. Kelly, Thomas K. Kennard, Edward R. Kiwandowski, John King, Richard Klotz, Leroy Marvin Cluth, Barney Kamak, Eugene Kamick, Orville Knierim, Joseph G. Kordick, Jerry E. Kovar, Stanley J. Kozasik, Joseph R. Kroll, Stanley Kresmer, Harold G. Crone, Robert W. Cross, Stephen A. E. Kubik, Andrew Kebrick, Robert A. Q, Dennis J. Kuda, Howard George Larson, Roy Larson, William R. Lawrence, Lester L. Lair, Dominic Leonardo, William Lester, Gerald E. Lichtenwalter, Carl Lindy, David Lindstrom, Raymond E. Lorden, John P. Luskus, Walter Frank Madsen, Marvin A. Mager, Michael Mahaney, Donald W. Maher, Richard A. Mango, Gerald W. Mark, Pete A. Markunis, Louis P. Messidi Jr., Samuel Matthews III, James C. McCarthy, James McCauley, Billy G. McClard, Robert McGann, John Otis McCleary, Frank C. McClenahan, James D. McElroy, John R. McKendry, James McElmore. I'll repeat that. James McElmore, Joseph Madrano, Robert Mears, Yolando Malai, Louis D. Maynahan, Robert Mensick, George E. Merica, James Marion, Gerald Messix, Tom L. Metz, Joseph Metzger, Michael Mikas, Robert Mills, Paul Mizovitz Jr., Russell Morgan, Warren Mankey, Bernard L. Mandela, Gerald R. Mankowski, Charles B. Margeron, Lawrence Marquardt, Robert Martinson, Wayne Massey, Ira Maynard, Ralph C. Matuziak, Michael McCoos, Mark Mondragon Jr., Frank Mondry, Henry J. Mutel, James Moy, Hans W. Mueller, Arthur C. Mullen Jr., Bruce A. Mullen, Vito Mirabito, Robert E. Murphy, John Leo Naraki, Joseph Nichols, Nicholas J. Nijakowski, Everett H. Nissen, John Nordsel, Ben Novelli Jr., Edward Auclia, Lawrence E. Oglesby, Morris Ackerland, Henry J. Oliveri Sr., Robert E. O'Neill, Robert J. O'Meara, Theodore Osich, Paul Oswald, Douglas Osborne, Lawrence A. Paha, Joseph J. Polesny, Rudolph Piloto, Mario J. Pascarella, Philip Pascarella, George F. Pasquier, Rudolph Pavlaka, Leonard Pearson, Leonard H. Pechtold, Casimir Pecolis, Bruce R. Pedgrim Sr., Bruce R. Pedgrim Sr., William Peters, John A. Peterson, David R. Phillips, Charles Pizanka, Angelo Pizdurzi, Frank A. Plesser, Edward J. Polito, Edward F. Prusser, Scott B. Price, James H. Prince Sr., Henry F. Perkosky, Francis B. Pugliese, Joseph Pugliese, Louis A. Rabelhofer, William Rankin Sr., Charles A. Reddy, Paul M. Rebus, Ronald C. Reid, John P. Reedy, Erwin H. Reimer, Alex A. Rembus, Catherine M. Reynolds, Frederick M. Reister, Lee R. Rinker, Walter Ritt, Manuel C. Rod, Daniel J. Romer, Patrick Rogers, William M. Rogue, Donald S. Rosolowski, John E. Rossi, Rivaldo T. Rossini, Robert Roth, Dominic Rotondo Jr., Louis Stanley Rudnicki, Pompeo Ruggieri, Ronald Rezepka, Don Sabatino, Robert S. Sadak, Charles F. Samick, Albert L. Saviano, Matt Sako, Rodney Schaefer, John J. Schilling, Joe Schmidt, Alfred Schrank, Roy J. Schuck, George R. Schultz, David A. Schump, Harold Schwab, Frank Stanley Sedzlars, John Selheimer, William L. Schonefeld, Thomas C. Shannon, Walter J. Shatkus, Albert R. Shaw, Francis G. Sheridan, Charlie Shields, Jim Shields, Ralph J. Show, Ralph R. Schult, George Shutak, George D. Shutak, Frederick A. Siekman, Eric P. Simmons, Gordon E. Slade, Walter J. Smialek Jr., Charles R. Smith, Dudley H. Smith, Paul J. Sosnowski, Sylvester S. Sosnowski, Joseph Sotosanto, Roger W. Southard, Daniel R. Spur Jr., Stade, Michael R. Stanich, Ivan Stankowitz, Lawrence John Stazatis, William Staton, Gerald Stillman, Roderick W. Story, Clarence Stunkel, Leonard Stunkel, William Stunkel, Benedict H. Staracco, Thomas Strader, Ronald R. Stromberg, Melvin Stutzram, Larry Subert, Bernard Sundberg, Robert Sweeten, Donald Swinford, Albert R. Sylvester, Joseph J. Zarmak, John Edward Taylor, Michael M. Thompson, Art Thompson Jr., William R. Talameri, Philip Toth, R. Harold Trezise Sr., Albert C. Treble Jr., Henry A. Tumbolella, Stanley A. Tylinski, Lawrence L. Unger, Dominic Venuso, Joe A. Villarreal, Matt Valutis, William Wace, Andrew Walchek, William J. Walker, Fred A. Wallerstedt, William M. Walsh, Ralph D. Ward, Clement W. Warner, Robert Warren, James Weingardner, John T. Welling, Howard Werner, Walter Werner, Charles Wirt, Emil Willie, Howard Willis, Anthony C. Williams, Matthew David Williams, Wayne E. Worth, Lester E. Wesky, Ronald W. Yates, Van Earl Yunker, Thomas J. Zane, Lowell F. Zimmerman, and those buried at Abraham Lincoln. Wendell Anderson, Thomas M. Allen, Ronald William K. Atkinson, Neil M. Baker, Janet Bates, Michael Allen Beebe, David Lee Benson, John H. Benson, Albert O. Bashansky, Brian J. Bielecki, Sonny Blackburn, George E. Blass, William G. Blocker, Albert M. Bodine, Wayne Bracken, Leonard J. Brainer, Glenn A. Bruce, Gary P. Cheatham, James Clark, Thomas A. Cole, George J. Coles, Clark Cookingham, Robert L. Chrissy, Louis Chikowski, Bob L. Dalton, Richard A. DeWolf, Gilbert DeRazio, John E. Dunham, Reggie Ellisines, Tim Engstrom, D.C. Epperson, Joseph G. Every, John E. Fiddick Jr., Donald J. Filipiak, David H. Finnegan, Herschel J. Lloyd, Charles Foote, Francis X. Gayon, Robert W. Garrett, Edward J. Geisler Jr., John A. Glaubke, Tara D. Graveline, Frank O. Gray, William D. Griffith Sr., Leonard A. Ham, Chester E. Hankoski, John J. Hanson, Calvert E. Heath Jr., Joseph G. Hebbard Sr., Vincent L. Herman, Robert A. Herrick, Leonardus H. Hine, Gerald W. Howard, Patrick C. Jesse, Clarence Jones, Patrick H. Jordan, Kenneth W. Kaiser, Eugene Kameg, Carl W. Kelling Jr., William H. Krosky, John L. Kuhnhart, James G. Lally, Joseph A. Lentees, John Lindemuller, Thomas P. Mikowski, Robert L. Mansell, Charles B. Margeron, Anthony Marine Jr., Thomas P. Martin, Richard M. Motlaz, Lyle MacArthur, W. Stevens McCarthy, Robert T. McGill, Edward I. Melby, Donald R. Melcher, Rusty Meyer, George R. Mistro, William J. Mix, Martin J. Mobeck, Robert H. Moore, Larry Morgan, Hans D. Mosch, George D. Moyle, James R. Murray Sr., Raymond J. Mitzkowitz, James L. O'Brien, Michael Ray O'Brien, Howard L. Pample, Kello Panici, Hedrick E. Partee, Frank Pacetto, Bonnie L. Petrala, Michael J. Pisturzi, Bruce R. Pletch, Ralph G. Port, Ronald J. Porter, Mel G. Provencher, Thomas A. Putman, Philip J. Raven, Ronald C. Reid, Frank Renz, Morgan W. Roderick, Richard S. Roscoe, Thomas L. Saindon, George E. Sangmeister, John W. Scanlon, Donald L. Schofield, Ronald A. Senesac, James H. Sexton, Dale L. Sherwin, George W. Schultz, Leroy A. Skinkus, Richard Skopik, Vincent A. Sola, Stephen J. Solava, Chester Soltese, Colin E. Sorensen, Gerald C. Squiroot, John R. Stack, Cyril Strazo, Antonio Sutero, John Valenti, Richard C. Wagner, Paul Wessel Jr., Emmanuel S. White, Walter G. Wierzbicki, Ronald Zielkowski. That concludes the reading of the roll. May God bless them, their families, and continue to bless this great country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken. Wonderful job as always. The Frankfort VFW will now present a rifle salute, followed by taps, performed by Hickory Creek Middle School students Jackson Cummings, Aiden Reid, and directed by Doug Adams.
Detail, attention. Port, arms. With ammunition. Ready. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Ready, front.
We appreciate you tuning in to this special Memorial Day ceremony and hope to see you in person next year. Stay safe.